Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
Sounds just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Don't touch anything. Whatever you do, don't touch anything. Something else might break this morning. That's kind of been. Good morning. Welcome to it. It's Tuesday. It's Brian in the chat room just said it's Doom Day. I'm already there. I've been up since 3:15 this morning fighting technical issues. It's wow. Well, how I thought today was Tuesday, not Monday. Tuesday, not Monday. Oh, look at that. The crying and the screaming and crying is going on. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only podcast, to the social media sites, as well as Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, where we broadcast and simulcast the show each and every day here across the state of Alaska and across the world. We appreciate you guys coming in and joining us. Good morning. How are you? Are you ready? It's a Monday. We've been fighting issues all morning, but I'm ready now for some answers and some solutions. Brad Keithley is sure to bring us some answers and solutions, right? I mean, I'm sure there won't be anything bad in any of this. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great. Did you get caught up in the Cloudflare outage? Is that what's going on?
I don't know. There must be. Is that what's going on? Is there I've been running so hard that I haven't even looked on the internet. Is there
so Twitter was down for a while. Chat GPT was down for a while, or GTP or whichever it is, was down for a while. Cloudflare has had a big outage. So.
All right. Well, maybe that's been part of my problem because, man, my alarm started screaming again this morning, and it sounds like a fire engine siren in my ear. So it's just letting me know I've been on and off the air all morning on one of the stations, and I've just been fighting it like I can't. Anyway, that's my problem. Hi, Brad. Let's talk about our problems, our collective problems, shall we? Brad Keithley comes in every week. You hear that? Brad Keithley comes in every week to let us know. Oh my goodness, that that we've got issues out there. In case you couldn't tell, we've got issues, and he joins us now to get things going on. So Brad, I'm sorry. Let me pull that back. Good Lord, man. I do not know what's going on this morning. It's just like one thing after another. Hi, Brad. How are you?
So one of the top three needs to be technological issues. Is that the?
Yeah, no, definitely technological issues. Brad comes in every week to give us the big three issues that he thinks we should be facing or thinking about this week as we continue on and look at state government. This week, we start off with a discussion on the Education Task Force. What is the needed discussion? Now, I will full caveat before we get started. I feel like the Education Task Force is nothing more than political cover. They've already decided what the outcome is that they want. Now they're just looking to get political cover to justify it. But Brad, tell me what you think this big discussion should be.
Well, the Education Task Force had another meeting last week, and it was, as you're describing it, mostly political cover for why they need to increase K through 12 spending. And various justifications, witness after witness after witness about various justifications for why they need to increase it. But there was one slide in the midst of this entire presentation. There was one slide that slipped in that talked about the revenue side. if they're going to increase spending, or even if they're going to maintain the spending they've already increased to last session, where the heck are the revenues going to come from? And that's not been that's been the exception rather than the rule in terms of discussions by the task force so far. But in Matt Berman's presentation from ICER, there was one slide that slipped in that essentially talked about the revenue side, and I found it interesting, and I think it's a focal point that needs to be the focal point of an equal focal point. Revenues need to be where the revenue is going to come from, needs to be an equal focal point with, what do we need to be spending and where do we need to be spending it. And this one slide I just found interesting. It is sort of a follow-up to a discussion we had on a previous show a few weeks ago, but it sort of encapsulates it in one slide. Matt was going through what this slide is part of. Matt was going through a presentation on how Alaska compares to the rest of the states, to the United States generally, mostly in terms of spending level, mostly in terms of spending level per student and all sorts of criteria. But this one slide gets in there talking about the revenue side, and it sort of encapsulates the problem we have. Alaska, the headline of it is Alaska relies more on state revenue sources and less on local funding than schools nationwide. And it uses the latest census data that we've got, Census Bureau data on school funding, both the revenue side and the spending side, uses the latest census data that we got to break down revenue levels into three categories: federal, state, and local. And it shows Alaska on the left-hand side, what the revenue sources are for Alaska on the left-hand side, and it shows what the U.S. average is on the right-hand side. And the numbers are starkly different. On the Alaska side, 22% of Alaska revenues in the latest census numbers, the 2023 census numbers, 22% of Alaska's revenues for schools comes from federal sources. On the U.S. average side, only 13% comes from federal sources. So that's one difference. The big difference, though, that I want to talk about is the relationship between local funding and state funding. On the Alaska side, 55% of all school funding comes from the state. On the federal, on the U.S. average side, only 45%, 10% less than Alaska, comes from the state. On the Alaska side, 23% comes from local sources. 23% of all funding comes from local sources. On the U.S. average side, 43% comes from local sources. 20% higher than on Alaska. The way I look at this, take out federal and look what the division between the state and the localities are, the source of funding coming from the state and the localities. On the U.S. average level, it's 45 state, 43 local, about even, about 50%, a little over 50% coming from the state side, a little under 50% coming from the local side, but when you round them, about 50-50 between state and local. On Alaska, it's more than 2 to 1. It's more than 2 to 1 on the state side versus the local side. The local side is significantly less, and on a total average, let's see, between the two, 75%, according to the latest numbers, 75% is coming, 76% is coming from Alaska, 24% or come from the state side, 24% coming from the local side. Some people look at this and say, well, you can't really do that because Alaska's got the REAAs. It's got those school districts that the state funds entirely, and that's what's distorting the percentage. That's not true. I ran a calculation using the state's numbers and excluded the REAAs and took those out of the calculation, and it's still 71% between the two, between state and local. It's still 71% state funding and roughly 30%, 29% local funding. So the ratio of dominant state funding to local funding exists even after you take out the REAAs. The reason is the REAAs really don't take that much money, and so they don't distort the overall percentages all that much, even though they're totally funded by the state. Here's the thing that I want to focus on. When a lot of people like to say, "Oh, Alaska's funding its schools at a lower level than the national average. It's doing this or it's doing that compared to the national average." Well, if we're going to use that, I mean, if that's good for looking at the spending side, it ought to be good for looking at the revenue side. And Alaska is utilizing local revenues to a lot lower extent than nationally. That drives a lot of things. When the localities don't have to pick up a big part of the tab of spending, when it's all essentially to them free money coming from the state, they're not very cost conscious. When they don't have to go to their constituents and explain, "Oh, we need more funding for this or we need more funding for that." If you want to do if you want to build a new building or if you want to expand programs, we're going to need to increase local taxes. They don't experience that pushback that goes on at the national level. And so when you also talk about consolidation, I mean, my mother lives in Illinois. I spend a lot of time here now with her. There's a lot bigger local funding share in Illinois than there is in Alaska. And so you have consolidation of school districts in Illinois. I mean, the localities have to face up to the fact that they don't have enough revenue base within these smaller school districts anymore to sustain themselves. So they consolidate. So they have to consolidate with adjacent school districts and build bigger school districts that have that bigger tax base and can pay for the type of schools that people want. We don't have that pressure in Alaska because the state's funding for it. So the local school boards essentially say, we'll just go to the state and lobby for more money. We don't need to worry about the spending side. We need to worry about the revenue side. I mean, we'll spend everything we can get, and the revenue's coming from the state largely. So we need to focus. We need to focus on lobbying the state. That's where the revenues are. We don't need to worry about selling it to our local constituents we don't have any pushback from our local constituents because the bulk of the funding is coming from the state. So I think this slide and the issue of where are the revenues going to come from in terms of funding not only the increases that the task force is pushing for, but also just the base funding. I think this slide should be, sort of its own presentation or its own session around what the revenues are going to be and how we're going to raise these revenues. And if looking at national averages is good on the spending side, it ought to be good on the revenue side, and we ought to focus on, if you want to raise additional revenues, it needs to come from the local level, and let's talk about how we're going to do that.
Now, part of this problem, of course, deals with the equity thing that the federal government has put on us over the PILT, right? The payment in lieu of taxes and things like that. And so many of these places are capped. They can't spend any more locally because of this federal rule, because we receive $100 million or something, $124 million from the federal government in payment in lieu of taxes. And to get that money, they say, okay, well, then you can't have any disparity between what you spend in one district and another up to a certain point. And so we've got some places where they're spending locally, they're contributing almost to the cap. And most places are spending a significant amount towards their cap, 75% plus. But if we keep taking this federal money, we can't increase the local contribution anymore.
So we're like the last state that takes federal money, that uses federal money in this way. It's not that the federal money doesn't come to Alaska if we stop doing the way we're doing it. It's that the federal money will go to the districts that are creating the entitlement to this money or creating the claim on this money. It will go directly to those districts as opposed to coming through the state. If it doesn't come through the state, if the state isn't the one that's acting as the flow through, then the federal disparity test goes away. And as I say, we are the last state that is doing it this way and the last state that's subject to the disparity test. I think it's time for, again, if we're going to compare Alaska to the rest of the nation, I think it's time for Alaska to be like the rest of the nation and back off from using the federal PILT money in the way we're using it. And the way we're using it is it's coming into the state, and the state gets to back off what it's spending by substituting the PILT money for state revenues. If we, as part of the redesign, we say, okay, look, we need to be more like the national average. If we're going to be more like the national average on the spending side, we need to be more like the national average on the revenue side. And if we, as part of the redesign of this, we can say, okay, the PILT money is going to go direct to those districts. A number of those districts that generate the PILT money or that create the entitlement to the PILT money are the REAAs. So that money would go direct to the REAAs and would reduce the amount that the state is having to pay to the REAAs, because they would start getting federal money directly. So it's part of the calculation, but it's not a reason to keep this disparity between the localities and the state in place. Other places have done away with it. We can do away with it as well.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Now, quickly, Brad, 30 seconds. What do you think the chances are that the Education Committee actually takes a look at this in any way, shape, or form?
Maybe low, but I think it's an issue that we ought to keep pressing. I mean, what they want to do is they want all of the gravy, right? They want all of the, let's look at the national average, and we ought to be like the national average. Well, the pushback on that, part of the pushback on that needs to be, if you want to look at the national average, let's look at the national average on the revenue side also.
All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. We are coming up onto the next one. Number 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest here on the program. Donna says, I agree with Brad. Every other state. Donna Ardwin in the chat room. Harold said, where are you going to get your local contributions in rural Alaska? That was the whole point, was that the federal monies go straight to rural Alaska in lieu of the local contributions, right, Brad?
Well, some of the REAA money goes to like Anchorage and Fairbanks because of the airport, because of the military bases, but it follows where federal lands are. So those districts that have large federal lands would have a large influx of the PILT money. I've not done an analysis of where that shows up by district, but it in some of the REAA districts it shows up that way. In terms of Western Alaska, where's the local contribution going to come from? Well, you know, they could use sales taxes to generate revenues, local sales taxes to generate revenues, as opposed to property taxes. There's a number of ways. And then, as I said, in Illinois, one of the pressures that results from that is consolidation of districts, reduction of administrative costs, reduction of overhead costs through consolidation. So it would force the local districts, not only in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas, to look at how they're doing things and look at reducing the cost structure of what they've got in those districts. Absolutely.
Speaking of education, I'll sidebar for just a second. Lisa just made the announcement. Nikolaevas Charter School was approved 5-3. They needed 5 to get it to pass, and they are excited. Nikolaevas, of course, had their school closed, and they've been fighting to try and get a charter school built in there or put together in there, and they finally got it done. I got the message last night. So, but Lisa is passing the good news on this morning. That is good news as well. You know, Brad, the problem is that I am. The problem is that they've already decided, I think, what they want to do. And now they're just that's really the whole impetus and the whole appearance of this whole education task force thing so far has been they don't want any outside testimony. It's all industry insiders and municipal Municipal League and all these other kind of guys, and it's all just pushing for we need more. And I don't think there's really any deeper analysis going on, and that's where I think that this falls apart. I agree with you, but I just don't think that they're that interested in looking at it.
Well, there's a couple of things I'd say, Michael. One, we've got Cronk and Ruffridge on the task force, right? And I would look to them to at least raise the issue. Maybe it's not an issue that's raised by those who are pushing for more spending, but Cronk and Ruffridge are on the task force, and I would think that we should look to them to raise the revenue issue. Ruffridge did in one of the earlier sessions briefly, but I think as members of the task force, they have the right to ask questions and have the right to press on that issue. The other is I don't know that we've got a unified position from all of the special interests about funding. I mean, AML, the Alaska Municipal League, testified in favor of eliminating the caps on local funding, essentially dealing with the disparity test by eliminating the state's use of that at the state level, eliminating the state's use of those federal funds. And so I think there might be some support even among the special interests to go to a bigger local presence, local funding on education.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Sorry, I'm just thinking. I'm thinking. How can we get this to Cronk and Ruffridge and guys like that? How can we show them this? I don't know. I know Mike Cronk watches the show occasionally, but I really wish that they would get into this. Now, you did say something, and I didn't want people to hear what you didn't say. Rick said, Brad, quote, we don't need to worry about spending, unquote. Brad. Really? That's not really what you were saying, right? You were saying that they were talking about the comparative of U.S. average spending. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they're focusing on spending. People will worry about spending. It's who worries about spending. I think we would benefit as a state if we pushed the who worries about spending levels down to the local level. If the local school board members had to look their neighbors in the eye when they go to the grocery store, and the neighbors are going to have to pay for that increased spending that the school board's pushing for, I think we have a lot different result than we do under the current system. So it's who pays for the spending is the big issue.
All right. 8 seconds out. Here we go. We're jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay, continuing now. Brad Keithley is our guest. And this sounds like it's going on. Number 2 of the weekly top 3 sounds like it's my house. It's your fault. No, it's my fault. No, it's my fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's Brad. What do you mean? We're playing the back and forth game. What's going on here? Is it your fault, Brad, or is it my fault?
There was an article that I didn't see anyplace else in the Juneau Empire, and it was a report on a presentation gave by the Juneau delegation, the Juneau Jesse Keel, the Juneau senator, and Andy Story, I think it was, one of the representatives to the Juneau Chamber of Commerce. The headline of the story is, "What does the future hold for the permanent fund dividend?" And of course, that immediately got my attention. And it's really reporting on what Keel said about that issue at this presentation. I've heard the phrase. So here's the parts of it, the part of the article that I found interesting. Keel said last year he was disappointed that the governor did not release a more realistic budget proposal, one that wouldn't need to be drastically rewritten by the legislature. Last week, he said many legislatures doubt that the new plan will be substantially different, but he's choosing to remain hopeful. I've heard the phrase, "a leopard can't change its spots," a couple of times. Keel said, "I choose optimism. We live in Alaska, so I'm hoping we got a ptarmigan that will change feathers again." Still, Keel warned that without a serious fiscal proposal from the governor, the state's payout program, the PFD, could be at risk. If the feathers don't change and if we don't get a serious proposal for a fiscal plan that the legislature can then act upon, it'll be the end. This is Keel. It'll be the end of the permanent fund dividend check. What we've got going on here is is a game of it's not my fault, it's your fault, and then the other guy says it's not my fault, it's your fault.
Right.
The governor says that he won't develop alternative revenues, that he won't take the lead in developing alternative revenues, that he will wait for something from the legislature to come up on alternative revenues. And without alternative revenues, the PFD is dead. I mean, what we're doing is we're essentially taxing the PFD, taxing middle and lower income Alaska families to pay for the deficit gap, huge deficit gap that we've developed at the state level. And if we don't have alternative revenues to fit in to pay for that gap, then the PFD gradually is going to be totally consumed. The governor Dunleavy has said, he's not going to move forward on alternative revenues, substitute revenues. He's going to wait for the legislature to do something and bring that forward to him. Now we got Keel, one of the most influential senators on the Senate majority side. Keel saying it's not our fault. We're waiting for the governor to come forward with a proposal on alternative revenues, and if he doesn't come forward with an alternative with a proposal on alternative revenues, it'll be the end. This is to quote Keel. It'll be the end of the permanent fund dividend check. The last time I checked, both of them, either of them could put something on the table. Yeah. The governor has the ability to put bills on the table through the Rules Committee, to put bills on the table. He does that with the budget every year. He does that with a variety of administration proposals, put bills on the table in the legislature and trigger the legislature's consideration of legislation. The legislators certainly have the ability to put in bills and to bring them up in committee and pursue them themselves. And so, what we've got here on the PFD is everybody each side trying to blame the other for not moving forward with a PFD fix. And each side saying, well, if the PFD ends, it's your fault for not having moved forward with legislation. Sometimes I hear legislators say, oh, well, even if we did this, even if we passed a bill, governor would veto it, and so it'd be all for nothing. Well, that didn't stop them on education funding. I mean, the potential fear of administration putback didn't stop them on education funding. It's a made up excuse. Right. Nobody has the guts to step up and say there are more equitable ways to fund government than what we're doing right now, and to make that and to put that proposal on the table. They want to blame somebody else for not going first. And I just think I think it's a testimony to how gutless both sides, both the administration and the legislature have become on this issue.
Well, and there's some deep irony here, first of all, because Keel was such a key player in the fiscal policy working group, and he signed off on exactly the fiscal plan that would help fix this. And yet he didn't propose anything. He didn't support any of Ben Carpenter's. He didn't put any of those things forward. He's looking at the governor. The second part of irony that Anthony just points out, that it's ironically fitting that he's comparing the government and its ideas to a ptarmigan, the dumbest game bird in history, the one game bird you can kill with a rock if you're cautious. I mean, that's the way to compare government to but I mean, that's where we're at right now. I mean, it is it's not my fault, it's your fault. Even though I have the solution right here in my pocket, I'm just not willing to, like you said, they don't have the guts to step up and say, we spent all this time producing it, we all agreed on it, and now we're just going to put it back in the file cabinet and walk away.
Yeah, that's an excellent point on Keel. I mean, he was part of the fiscal policy working group. He lobbied to get himself on there. He lobbied to become part of it. He was part of those who signed off on the comprehensive plan, which is what the fiscal policy working group is. A little bit, as we talked on previous shows, a little bit of everything, a little bit of oil company revenue, of increased oil company revenues, a little bit of spending cuts, a little bit of broad-based revenues, a little bit of PFD restructuring to go down to POMB 50/50, a little bit of everything, broaden the base, spread the burden, and everybody just takes a little bit of the haircut needed to resolve the fiscal situation. Keel was part of that, lobbied to get himself on there, and was an influential part of the result. And now he's just stepping back and saying, not my fault. It's the governor's fault for not putting a plan on the floor. It is the worst of government from both sides for neither to put the plan on the floor. I mean, all the governor would have to do is say, okay, you guys set up a fiscal policy working group. This was your proposal. Bam. Here's your proposal. I put it forward. You want it as an administration proposal? Here it is on the table. Now, live up to what your fiscal policy working group proposed. That's all he'd have to do. The legislature by the same token, all they have to do is say, okay, we did a fiscal policy working group. We came up with a proposal. Bam, let's do it. And let's go forward with it. It's sitting there for either side to use. And both sides are essentially saying, not mine. I'm walking away from it, and letting the worst possible solution, the most regressive tax ever proposed, to quote Matt Berman again, letting the worst possible solution being the one that they continue to default to.
Right. Well, inaction is action. Really. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They can just let it continue to dribble along and point the blame, play the blame game and point fingers, and they just can continue to let government spend continue to increase. And they're okay. A lot of them are okay with that. They're just fine with that. And of course, we're not seeing a lot of the candidates bring this up either. A little bit. They're touching on it. They're brushing by it, but they're not embracing it. And they're not coming out with, the plan is already laid out. Even if you want to fold some of your new ideas into the same plan or modify it, overall, it's a plan that everybody in the legislature has signed their name. Well, not everybody, but a bunch of people in the legislature have signed their name to, that they agreed that this is what they could do. Well, now hold them to it. If you presented this to Keel, it would be kind of hard for him to go back and say, well, but, he could, but it would be a little eggy on the facey, kind of thing.
You did that once. You had Keel on the show, and you asked him that question, and it was, somebody's got to come forward and put the meat on the bone. It was sort of just a bones plan. And I agreed to 50-50 POMV, but it was contingent on a bunch of others. He walked away from it, but it's not it's not just him. Shelley Hughes was on the fiscal policy working group, and she's running for governor, and she puts fiscal policy as her number one issue, or first issue out of three. If you look at her website, there's not a word on there about the fiscal policy working group. I would think if I were her, I'd make that front and center of my campaign, but she's walking away from it. So it is an exercise. It is a demonstration of the gutlessness, how gutless government can be in everybody in terms of stepping up.
This is where that stereotypical rule by committee kind of thing came out, right? This is when you get a bunch of people and they can all point fingers at each other and say it's their fault, but they, nothing ever gets done, and it's the worst outcomes possible. This is what happens when you build an aircraft carrier by committee or whatever, and it sinks on the first day. This is where we're at, right? This is kind of where we're at right now. Nobody wants to take the blame. Nobody wants to have the hard truths, and nobody has the guts, as you said. Nobody has the guts to tell people the crisis is coming. The bridge is out. Pull the lever right now and we can stop this train, instead of just shoveling more coal into the hopper and say, we're going to jump the gap. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And Keel is, I first read that article and I thought, okay, good Lord, it's now we're having people predict it. Now we're having legislators predict the end of the PFD. But then the more I thought about it, the more, Keel could do something about this if he wanted to. The governor sure could do something about it, but Keel could do something about it also. And it's just, it is the worst possible, the demonstration of the worst possible outcome. Everybody running away from fixing what is clearly the worst possible solution to the situation we've gotten ourselves into.
And unfortunately, most Alaskans have no idea. I was having a conversation with somebody last week about the thing, and I'm like, well, the things, and then I said the big deficit, and they're like, big deficit? What are you talking about? They've got no idea. They have no idea that this is coming. They have no idea that the crisis that we're about to face and the loss of the PFD. So I had this 10-minute explainer with them, and they're like, wow. They're just not paying attention to what's going on, which is by design, I guess. It's frustrating to see. And so I don't have much hope. The session starts in 60 days. And I have very little hope that anybody is going to, the governor or anybody else is going to come forward with some kind of long-term fiscal plan. What do you think? Give me a Vegas odds on this real quick, Brad.
Well, remember the governor said last spring, he was going to have a fiscal plan out by the end of the year. Remember that? I'm going to go back and find that quote so I can start using that. But he said he was going to have a fiscal plan out. He was going to put a fiscal plan on the table by the end of the year. Well, the governor's budget's due in 30 days, a little under 30 days. The revenue forecast is due. The fall revenue forecast is due in a little under 30 days. If he's going to come up with a fiscal plan, as he said he was, now's the time to do it. So I don't know. Are people as good as their word? Maybe not.
Wow. Was that even a question? I think that was rhetorical at this point. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 3 dead ahead. Don't go anywhere. We're back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, the weekly top 3. That's what I was trying to say, Jeffrey. Jeffrey says governing by committee makes it so nobody is culpable. And that's again, it's the finger pointing and everything else. And it's not my fault. It's their fault. It's the governing by committee makes everyone blameless and they can just play dumb and keep doing what they've been doing. Oh boy, something I actually agree with on Harold. He said, I watch Gavel to Gavel. There's plenty of guts. It's the backbone that's suspect. True. I mean, they're pretty gutsy in some of the proposals that they put out there to spend all your money. They got some guts for that, but they have no backbone when it comes to actually, making some of those hard choices as well. So they can make some gutsy moves, but only when it benefits them at that point as well. Brad, I mean, I feel like this is where I'm coming to that point of the year where I'm just exhausted from all the political stuff, watching this. And again, I was so shocked that this guy had no clue that what I was talking about. Cause I mean, I know a lot of people don't, but I figured this guy would know what was going on. I figured this person, they're kind of in the know. They're plugged in, and they just looked at me with this blank glazed expression. And I was like, holy crap, we are in so much trouble. We are in so much problem. We're in so much trouble at this point.
Well, it's the Orwellian use of language that both the legislators largely and the press have adopted, right? I mean, surplus now is the word we use to describe excess PFD cuts. Balance is that we've taxed middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts enough that spending revenues equals spending, but you're not focusing on where the revenues are coming from, and you're not focusing on the fact that there's this huge gap in the traditional budget that's being closed by this PFD tax on middle and lower income Alaska families. So we've adopted this Orwellian language that misleads people. I mean, intentionally misleads people into thinking, we're doing okay. We got a balanced budget, and sometimes we even have a surplus. And so the government's doing okay. We've adopted this newspeak that legislators use and the press picks up on and the press uses, and the governor doesn't push back on it much. And even conservative legislators don't push back on it much. So you've got this whole language that misleads people like your friend. And you can read George Orwell's 1984 and understand what that leads to. It leads to this whole surreal world built upon the misuse of language.
Up is down, down is up.
Yep,
doesn't matter. It's all good.
Ministry of Peace is actually the Ministry of. I mean, it's
yeah.
There. You just you adopt newspeak that uses traditional words for the opposite meaning of what they've traditionally meant.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a topsy-turvy. It's the upside down. Rick says, are they gutless or they just don't have enough knowledge for the job? I'll be honest. I think that's given them a pass. I think they have enough knowledge at this point to know what's going on and understand it. I just think that they don't want to be out at the pointy end of the spear and take the slings and arrows. I mean, look at everybody who's bailing out of the legislature. It's like they can feel that the gravy train is about to end, and now's the time to get out before the real blame game starts. You know what I mean? That's what I feel anyway, Brad.
Well, there's no one who knows more in the legislature that knows more about these issues than the people who were on that working group, fiscal policy working group. Keel was on the fiscal policy working group. I mean, he certainly understands what he's saying. What he's saying is we're just going to continue taxing the PFD until it is no more, if nobody comes up with substitute revenue. So I mean, there may be a few legislators that are so clueless that they don't understand it. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. What did Corey say? Corey said, so, here it is. Seems like if they put this one out there, they'll have to admit that they're the ones that broke it to begin with. And again, that goes back to my whole rats leaving the sinking ship thing. This is the main people who are the ones that have the levers to be able to pull to make this happen are the same ones that broke it in the first place, Brad. And now, she's right. They would have to admit that the tack that they took and that their suppositions were wrong, and nobody wants to face that.
Yeah, maybe that's right. And the governor certainly, bears part of the responsibility for breaking it. He didn't follow up his spending cuts of 2019. He got strong pushback on that and never followed up with it again. And never followed up with substitute revenue. So yeah, everybody would have to admit that they're part of the problem. But but at least you could say it's a total problem. Everybody's failed, and I'm the one who's going to stand up and come up with a solution. Yeah.
No, and against the fiscal policy working group has got all the levers, all of there. Yes, Harold, it's got the oil giveaway. It's got more money from oil. Yes, it's got cuts. Yes, it's got a 50-50 PFD. Yes, it's got a spending cap. It's got all the components. Like you said, everybody's ox gets scored a little bit, but at least we'd come away with something that would actually be workable. But nobody, and of course, Ben Carpenter is almost a cautionary tale at this point for people. I don't know if anybody's going to want to touch it. That's the worst part. All right, we're 5 seconds out. Let's get back to it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, yada, yada.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
A little bit of a pain in the something. Anyway, welcome back to the program. Brad Keithley, the weekly top three. These are the three big things that Brad thinks we should be watching out for this week. And now we come to our favorite part of the show, which we seem to be repeating, quite with some regularity, is the discussion on how do we pay. This is supposed to be, this should be like the number one question asked at every discussion, meeting, candidate event, town hall, pre-session meeting. People should be asking, how do they pay? And Brad, what do you say?
Well, so this is a segment this is a subject we've talked about on previous shows, but I think it's one that bears repeating. The Fairbanks, there's articles in the News Miner, there's articles on Alaska News Source, the TV station website, about Fairbanks coming to preparing their legislative and capital priorities, preparing to talk to the legislators in the pre-session that they have, pre-session meeting that they have between the local government and the legislators up in Fairbanks, and it occurs throughout the state, about what the priorities are and how they should be, what priorities the legislators should take in terms of what local government thinks is important. This ought to be a two-way discussion. And my point is, this ought to be a two-way discussion. It's a one-way discussion largely. These sessions are a one-way discussion largely because it's local government telling legislators, this is what we think is important that we spend money on. These are the issues that we think you ought to prioritize as you look at the coming session. Some of it is defined benefits. Some of it is K through 12 spending. Some of it is school bond reimbursement. Some of it's all around money issues that the local government wants the state to spend more on, or live up to, or in the case of school bond reimbursement, or other things. But it's mostly the sessions are local government saying, we want you to prioritize these spending levels, this legislation or that legislation in the coming session. It ought to be a two-way discussion, and the legislators coming back, their part of the discussion should be, all right, how do you want us to pay for it? What is your, from the local level, what is your perspective on how we ought to pay for this? And if I were a legislator, probably will demonstrate why I'm not, but with this response, but if I were a legislator, I would say, look, the national average on K through 12 funding is that local government pays 50% of the state local combination, set aside the federal level. The state local combination, local government pays 50%. In Alaska, the average is that the state's paying 2-to-1, is paying 75%, 70%, while local government's getting off with 35% in terms of 33%, whatever, in terms of the percentage of combined payment. If you want us to authorize spending more, we need you to tell us how we ought to pay for it. And if those in local government are going to say, well, just additional PFD cuts, just wipe out the PFD, then let them say that, and let that be an issue then in their local races, that they're the ones pushing to wipe out the PFD. They're the ones that are pushing to push this burden off on middle and lower income Alaska families. If that's what they want to say, let them say it. But at least put the issue to them in terms of how are you going to pay for it? We think, as a legislator, I think that local government, when you look at the national averages on K through 12, for example, that local government ought to be contributing more. That if you want to spend more, or if you want to, pay for what we've already authorized, that local government ought to be paying more, and have that discussion with the local governments, put them on the spot to talk about how they think from a local perspective it ought to be paid for. Some of them may say increased restructured taxes on oil companies. Some of them may say statewide sales tax, but have them be part of the discussion. Don't let them off scot-free just saying, oh, we ought to spend more on this, spend more on that, spend more on this. You ought to reimburse us more for school bonds. You ought to give us more for K through 12. Don't let them off the hook just saying all of this ought to come from right. All of this ought to come from the state. Push back and ask them how they want to pay for it.
Because we've created this monster, right? You mentioned school bonds, and there's been plenty of times. I remember many discussions over school bonds over the years when I was in Fairbanks, where they would literally look you in the eye and go, "Oh, don't worry, won't cost you a thing. This is all state money," and where people realize that all of a sudden their property taxes are going to go up if the state doesn't reimburse, or if they had to pay for that themselves as a community, that all their property taxes would go up. I think that there'd be some pushback, but we've created this dependency state in so many ways. And we talk about dependency and welfare on the left, in the social safety net, and corporate welfare on the right with, contracts and everything else. But there's also this municipal welfare where they said, oh, we want the state to pay for everything. We have all these grandiose plans and these bright ideas, and it's state money, so don't worry about it. But now we should be worrying about it. That's the thing. I go back to the story of the mayor's chief of staff when I was on the borough assembly. And I remember I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that there was a program that the mayor's office was pushing. Oh, we need this program. Oh, it's great. It's this, it's that. And I said, why? This is not something that the people have asked for. This is just, and the chief of staff pulled me aside and goes, why are you so reticent against this? This is like free money. This is federal money. And I'm like, the money comes from somewhere. It's not free. And if we don't take it, somebody else will. Well, let them. At least we won't be part of the problem. But this is, again, that dependency state.
Yeah, to some degree, I look at local school boards anymore as what you're really electing when you elect your school board is you're electing lobbyists. Because what the local school board turns around and does and says, we need more money from the state. We need more money from the state to fund K through 12. We need to fund more money from the state to
Build schools.
Build schools, school bond reimbursement. And so you're really electing lobbyists. You're not electing administrators. You're not electing people who are sort of weighing the pros and the cons of anything. You're electing people who view their job as to go down to the state and lobby for more. And if we got to close a school, it's the state's fault. It's not my fault. It's the state's fault because the state didn't give us more money for K through 12, or in negotiations with teachers, teachers want more money. Well, the state needs to give us more money. It's not like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to go explain this to our constituents. It's a lobbying job to go lobby the state for more money. And so what I'm suggesting is we need to push back on those local governments, that legislators and others need to push back on local governments when they say we need more. The pushback is, well, where do you expect the more to come from? Where do you support the more coming from, the more revenue to pay for this more spending? Where do you support the more coming from? And if they want to say PFD cuts, if they want to say all taxes, let them say it. At least they're saying something, but force them on the record about where, from their perspective as an elected official in the locality, they expect the additional revenue to come from. This amorphous, it'll just come from the state, it shouldn't be an acceptable answer, because the state doesn't have any more money. The state's already running huge 30% deficits. 30% of the budget is deficit financed through PFD cuts. The state's already running these huge deficits. The state doesn't have any more money. So these sessions that are portrayed in the press and as they actually occur in the ones I've gone to, as they actually occur, are local people saying we need more from the state. We need the state to do this. We need the state. There needs to be a pushback on the localities and say, where do you support the additional money coming from?
60 seconds, Brad. Give me final thoughts for today.
Final thoughts are, we're in for a heck of a session. The governor's budget is due in 30 days. We're going to start focusing on what we expect to see in the governor's budget, what we should see in the governor's budget, what the revenue forecast is going to be in the fall revenue forecast, and what that's going to lead to. So it's going to be thin. And if the governor did what he did last year, it's going to be an abrogation of his responsibilities. But he said he's going to come up with a fiscal plan. So we're starting to look for the governor's fiscal plan.
Okay, we'll be looking out for that solid fiscal plan that he's been working on all year. We'll be pleasantly surprised if he actually delivers something. Otherwise, I think it'll just be business as usual. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. That's hour 1 in the can. Brad, thank you so much.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 is dead ahead. I got some thoughts. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. I just don't see any politician at this point, and let's face it, Dunleavy is aspirational for higher offices, I think, is my feeling on this. He's not going to be the one that has egg on his face that wants to put together some kind of fiscal plan that's unpopular. I mean, he's already done this once, right? It wasn't a fiscal plan, but it was just the cuts in his first budget, and he already got the beat down from the angry mob once. He's not going to want to do that again. And let's face it, if you have to put out a fiscal plan where everybody's going to get their going to feel the pain, nobody's going to be happy. He's not going to want to do that.
And so you ask, why the heck did the guy want to be governor? I mean, if he doesn't want to step up and take on the issues that are important to the state, and fiscal policy is a huge issue, hugely important to the state. If he doesn't want to step up and take on the issues that are important to the state, why the heck did he want to be governor? Why does he want to be senator? I mean, it doesn't get any easier at the national level. We're running a huge deficit at the national level also. Social Security is a mess and about to crash and burn.
Oh, except you're one of 100 if you're a senator, so you can't take the blame personally. That might be the only reason why.
Maybe so, but there are issues to confront. And Dunleavy, since 2019, has not demonstrated he's good at confronting issues. He's good at picking on things.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been great he's been hard on social policy, but he's not confronted the big issue of fiscal policy. And, why did he want to be governor if he didn't want to take this on?
Yeah. Donna says he loves the pageantry. Well, maybe, but that's not going to get you far. That and a 25 cents will buy you part of a cup of coffee at this point. Rick asked a good question, and I often wonder this. Do you ever get called for advice? Do politicians or politicos or people do they ever call you and say, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that?
I get off the record emails and off the record texts about various issues from various people, and then they sort of ignore it. Some do.
That's the worst, isn't it?
Some don't.
Let me compose this novel to answer your question, and then just crickets. None of it's ever incorporated, never discussed, never anything else. It's got to be frustrating.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like talk to Brad Keithley. Check, did that. Follow his advice. No, I'm not going to do that. But I talked to him. I've talked to various people. I've talked to people from all sides. Yeah, give me a break.
Yeah. No, I mean, I try and tell everybody that, they should be going back, listening to the podcasts of your shows, talking to you directly, doing whatever, because they'll be like, even some politicians, I try and break this down for them. They're like, what? I'm just like, are you not paying attention to what's going on? I mean, you guys are supposed to be what is, it's pretty, it's crazy. Bruce Tangeman. I'm sorry.
It's frustrating.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Bruce Tangeman in the chat room. Brad, what does the oil price need to dip to? $50, no doubt, for the entire POMV to be used for government, because the PFD will then be needed to fund the ADF, PCE, higher ed, and AHFC funds. It's pretty low.
It's in the 50s.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can probably do that calculation, but we're at 63 now, basically, for the year, and 61, and we're still showing some PFD over the next year. So it'll be in the 50s someplace.
Yeah, because it's what, $44 million per dollar barrel of oil, something like that. 40.
Oh yeah,
So I mean, you talk about a $10 drop, and it's about $440 million, right? So
yeah, it's between 35, and it depends on whether you're using the administration's numbers or ledge finance numbers. It varies, but it's between $35 and $40.
So somewhere, if we dropped down into the low 50s, we're 500 million less in the hole already. There goes the rest of the PFD at that.
Yeah,
point.
we're probably 55, mid 50s may do it. I mean, but it's speculation. I haven't run the numbers. There'd be a 5 in front of the number somewhere.
It would be a significant amount, and granted, the 660 million is about what the payout of the PFD was at this point. So it'll be interesting to watch. But Bruce says there's a 0 chance they escape Juneau next spring without at least $1,000 PFD, which will be entertaining to see which pots of money they tap to fund everything. Yeah, because it's a political year. Nobody wants to be the guy in the political year that ended the PFD.
The way I look at that, the way Bruce doesn't look at that, but the way I look at that is a $2,500 tax, $2,500 PFD cut. It's not $1,000 PFD; it's a $2,500 PFD cut. Yeah, $2,500 plus next year PFD cut that they need to do to balance the budget. That's how much in the hole the state is, that they need to tax middle and lower income Alaska families that much in order to close the deficit.
Well, it's like I was saying earlier, I thought that this would be the last year of the PFD, but then I can't remember if it was you or somebody else pointed out that it's an election year, and I thought, okay, well, maybe we'll get a PFD this year. But after that, the curve does not look great from there, right?
Yeah, it depends a lot on who's elected governor, I suppose. I still hope that there's a candidate yet to come that actually has a solid fiscal policy. Maybe there won't be. and I guess I hope on top of that candidate gets elected. Maybe they won't be, but I think in part it depends on who we elect as governor.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. All right, Brad, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on board as always.
Michael, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Live around the world on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble, as well as we simulcast the radio show every morning here on the big radio show. We got folks in the chat room right now hanging out with us, and we appreciate them coming in as well. It's always kind of fun. If you want to be part of it, probably the easiest way is to go over to Facebook. Facebook.com/Michael Duke Show /live if you want to be part of this whole situation. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Always a interesting discussion, sometimes a sobering discussion, but overall, it's all aspects of the same thing. It seems like every time we're talking with Brad, it's all aspects of the same thing, which is how do we control the politicians that we put in office and get them to understand and look at this from an objective viewpoint of some kind of sound financial policy. And the problem is that we can't. They seem to be at this point immune to common sense, immune to the vagaries and to the, I guess just a basic understanding of arithmetic at some point. Maybe shock collars. Maybe we put shock collars on them and put those internet enabled shock collars. So anytime they, maybe that's what it's going to take. It's crazy. Brad, in fact, we just asked Brad the question, Brad, have you ever been contacted by anyone who, about the issues that you bring up, whether it's the new revenue, whether it's about the problems with the Permanent Fund Corporation, whether it's about the spending on education, or what he was just talking about with the state, federal, local contribution split, or has anybody? And he said, well, I get off the record requests, text messages and emails, sometimes off the record. And he said, and so I give them my advice. And he said, they pretty much blatantly ignore it. It's like something that they just needed to check off their list. I've told several candidates that I believe would be decent candidates, that if they really want to understand some of these issues a little bit better, that they should be, watching the show on Tuesdays. They should go back and listen to the podcast from Tuesdays when Brad's been on. You should reach out to Brad directly. I've given Brad's information out, contact information out. So I don't know who's contacted him and who's not, but I'm trying to get these legislators to to at least have the discussion with somebody who's thinking about it from a different perspective. The problem is you get down into Juneau and it's a bubble, you know? It's like the pod people. You get down there with all these great ideas, and pretty soon you get down there and you're just subsumed by the system. And even people who have fight and scrapped, and the Mike Showers of the world, the Tammy Wilsons of the world, where they've tried to do the right thing, the Ben Carpenters of the world, eventually they run out of gas. They just can't, you can only smash your head. I used to say that. People say, what's it like being on the assembly? Well, smash your head into that door jamb until you're unconscious. And then when you wake up, start again. That's what it felt like. That's what it feels like when you've got a committee going on there feeling that collectively they all know better than you or economists or, basic math, how things are going to work. And, I look, I'm a simple guy. I come at this from a perspective of I try not to spend more than I take in. I try to live within my means. I try to do the best for everybody that I can, but I also understand that there's some personal responsibility for these folks to be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, or that there are just certain things that would be nice to have, but we just can't do it. We just can't do it. And that's kind of where we're at, man. Again, I was telling Brad earlier in the last hour that I was having a conversation with somebody last week, somebody who I would consider to be not ignorant, somebody who's kind of, plugged in, who I would expect to know, to know about what's happening kind of in state government and finances and things like that. And I made an offhanded comment about something about, especially with the big deficits and the fiscal crisis that we're going to be facing next year. And they looked at me blankly and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the deficit, the fact that we're spending more than we take in, the fact that, if it comes down to it, they may have to take the rest of the PFD just to pay for it because they refuse to talk about spending cuts, because they refuse to talk about right-sizing government, and they refuse to talk about any new form of revenue whatsoever. So the only available pot of money is the permanent fund dividend. And then once that's gone, then we're going to have even deeper problems. And they were a little shocked. Like they had, and I'm thinking, wait, I mean, this is somebody who I would consider to be, well educated, learned, kind of understands how everything's work. And yet this person themselves did not even understand what's coming. And Brad asked a very good question. Brad said, we were talking about Governor Dunleavy and why hasn't he done some of the things that he said he's going to do, and et cetera, et cetera. And Brad said, we should, you should ask him, why did you want to be governor then? If you're not willing to take the hard path, if you're not willing to, do the right thing, even when it, do the adult thing, then why do you want to be governor? And maybe that's the new question for all of our candidates here. Why do you want to be governor? And I've kind of asked that question a few times to some of the candidates, especially in light of the fiscal problems. And I've said, why would anybody want to be governor at this point to try and take over this sinking ship? It's like changing captains on the Titanic, 15 minutes after you struck the iceberg. Okay, new captain time. I'll be captain now. I want to be captain. Why? What would possess? Now, I'm sure that there's some people out there who just like a challenge and they want to see the state righted, et cetera, et cetera. But most of the time you look at most of these people and you're like, why would you want to take over now? This is probably going to be one of the most difficult administrations in state history, presiding over the madness that's going to be $1 billion a year plus for the next 10 years. And that's assuming a flatline budget, by the way. That's assuming a flatline budget, $1 billion a year over the next 10 years. Which, again, is why they've been pushing so hard and talking so much about the combining of the corpus and the earnings reserve, because that'll give them just a little bit more time. That'll stop the bottom from dropping out for just a little bit more. But as I pointed out earlier, that at least if we had some kind of fiscal crash now, at least we'd have the permanent fund to help prop us back up and have some revenue come into the state. Whereas if we drain out the earnings reserve and we drain out the corpus and we eat into that seed corn, we'll have a crash and then have nothing to rebuild with. That's the problem. Miguel asked, if they combine that, wouldn't that take away the protection it currently has? Yes, that's the point, Miguel. That's the point. The point of the combining of the permanent fund and the earnings reserve account, the corpus of the fund and the earnings reserve account, is to have access to the corpus of the fund. Now, they may not say it that way, but they know it's a backstop. They know that even if they set the draw in statute and everything else, if there's just not enough money in earnings in a single year, and there won't be, folks, there won't be enough earnings to cover. If the spending continues to increase, there will not be enough money to cover the spending eventually, and it will start to eat into the seed corn. So that would be working as intended. And this is what I've been saying on this program for 25 years. That is just way too big and juicy a pot of money for them not to want to get their hands on it. That's just the bottom line. Way too juicy a target for them to say, well, we should just, we need to leave hands off. And they're not thinking about the future. Because again, the seed corn analogy is perfect, right? Because if the farmer eats all the corn, there's nothing left for next year. There's nothing left to plant. If you eat it or you sell it and there's no more seed corn, then what do? You starve. So the farmers always had to plan on retaining, portions of their crop. We've got to hold this much back for next year. And the problem is that nobody in the legislature, nobody in the past 10 legislatures, 20 legislatures has had that long-term vision. Well, there's been a few, but they've been pushed to the side. They've been excised. They've been excommunicated. They've been put in a corner with their little dunce caps on and told to shut up and sit down. And the rest of the crew just says, we're just going to spend it. We're too big to fail. Is the summation of the entire attitude of the vast majority of all legislators for the past 25 or 30 years, is that we are too big to fail. And the problem is, that's not true. And if we keep going the way that we're going to find that out the hard way. And yes, I said, if the spending continues to grow, well, which we know it's going to. Past performance is indicative of future results. That's where we're going. Frank just pointed out, farmers don't have to set aside seed corn anymore. They are subsidized. Again, part of the problem. I mean, it's a perfect example of the problem. But that's where we're at. I mean, people just don't understand. I mean, if you're listening to this show, have you talked to anybody in your circle of friends, in your acquaintances, your coworkers, your family members? Have you talked to any of them about this stuff? About where the state's going, about the deficits, about what's happening with the combining of the funds, about all these. Have you had conversations with anybody about it? Or is this all academic for you? And you're just like, oh, that's interesting. And then you go on your merry way. Somebody's got to start having these conversations. It can't just be me. Can't just be Brad. I mean, Brad and I have been talking about the same handful of issues for 13 years now. The same handful of issues that there's no movement on them. They're not getting fixed. And every time we talk about it, every time we've been talking about it, you can go from year to year and see it just gets worse. I mean, I remember back in 2014 when we were first having conversations with Brad about ICER and some of the other things, and he brought up the ICER budget analysis. They did a budget analysis and said, if we don't want to have a problem, we need to commit to spend no more than $3.9 billion on state government. That was 11 years ago. And we got all the legislators that were interviewed on the program who we'd ask them, oh, can you commit to this? Here's the ICER study. Oh, yeah, we can commit to that. Right. And then the next year it was, okay, well, if you spend no more than $4.1 billion, we can still save it. The PFD and everything, we could still save it. Oh, yeah, we can hold ourselves to 4.1. What are we at today? Almost $6 billion. No big deal. No big deal. I mean, this whole thing is, I mean, I don't know. I would hope that you guys who are listening, folks on the radio, folks in the chat room, folks listening to the podcast later, I hope that you would sit down and just broach this in conversation with somebody, around the coffee pot at work, or, at the dinner table, or, during the halftime of the game, or whatever it is. I would hope that you'd be having this kind of conversation, because the future is, by definition, the future is coming, and it's not going to be bright and shiny unless we get a handle on what we're doing. And that is my bottom line for that. All right, we got to go. We will continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show. It's I got nothing. I just got nothing at this point. What are we going to do? I'm just looking to see. If there was a. I'm just looking to see if there was a story that I wanted to cover in the next segment. I'm with Bill. Yesterday, Bill said that we just talk about holiday stuff, positive, good news, and food now. I mean, I'm rapidly getting to that point, right? I'm rapidly getting to that point where I'm like, yep, we're just going to talk about that. That's going to be good. But we'll see. We'll see where we're at. Tomorrow on the program, we're working on
Kevin McCabe. Okay. Yeah, he's going to be on in hour 1 tomorrow. And he's going to be on in hour 1, so we're going to stretch it with him tomorrow. And then I know Melissa and I see Melissa's in the chat room. Melissa, do you want to come on tomorrow morning at 7? Would that be good? We can have an after action review. We can have a debriefing on your time at the Fairbanks School Board. Does that sound good to you? Maybe we can get Melissa on at 7 tomorrow, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Yeah, no, Bill, Melissa says let's do it. Okay, so tomorrow, Kevin McCabe and Melissa Burnett will be joining us on the program. And then Thursday, I don't know at this point. Like I said, at this time of year, I start to rapidly run out of steam where I'm just like, man, do I really want to talk more about the same thing that we've been talking about for the last umpteen number of months? It's frustrating. This is why I need the Christmas break, because that gives me hope. I see the light in the sky and it gives me hope. And I can do it. I can go and fight the battle for another year. Oof. All right. Let's see. What else is... Let me see what else. What other stories do we got? We got any other stories here that are just I can't say no to? Okay, we can talk about that. All right, we got a couple things that we can dive into and talk about. Chris says that is the problem. Everyone just talks about it, but does nothing about the state overspending. Well, I mean, Chris, I agree. But you and I, we could talk about it all we want. I've been talking about it for years. But it's not like we can make the big difference, right? It's not like we can go in there and be king for a day or emperor. And, we are not empire. We can't just say, enjoy the peace and do as I say. It's, that's the problem. Now, a chief administrator in the state could steer the boat, but you got 60 rowers in the boat pulling in different directions. So even if you're on the tiller, it's still difficult to keep everything on track. We'll have to see what happens. Okay. I'm sorry. I suggested my wife watch the Sean Ryan interview with Mr. Ball, and now she's watching Ryan on a regular basis. My wife, too. My wife watches Sean Ryan a lot. And I've watched a few of his. I just don't have a lot of time. And his interviews are like 2 and 3 hours long, and I just don't have a lot of time. But he is, he is definitely got some good stuff there. 100%.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. So we just finalized during the break there. Luckily, I was able to finalize tomorrow's program. Joining us in hour 1, Kevin McCabe will be joining us, and we'll talk about his application to take over Mike Shower's seat and what he sees in the legislature, and what kind of difference he thinks that would make to be in the Senate versus the House, and what would take place after that, the domino effect. We'll talk about that with Kevin McCabe tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. He's going to be with us for 2.5 segments. And then in hour 2, we'll be joined by former Fairbanks School Board President Melissa Burnett, and she's going to come on board. And I told her it'll be like a debriefing after action review. And now that she's no longer part of the board, maybe she can tell us what she really thinks, right? And where do we think it's going? I mean, where do we think it's going? In Fairbanks and pretty much in everywhere else. We've got a lot of stuff that is going to be happening here in the next 90, 120 days. This session, again, all the vacancies that are about to pop up. It should be interesting. The Alaska Republican Party is now calling for qualified residents who wish to fill the vacant seat of Shelley Hughes to submit their application. After a 13-year run as a lawmaker, Hughes resigned from the Senate last week at that press conference. She was first appointed to the State House in 2012 by Governor Parnell. I forgot that she was appointed. Man, there's a lot of legislators who are first appointed and then elected. And what's interesting is that most of the ones that I've seen that have been appointed and then elected were fairly conservative. Like maybe they couldn't have gotten over the hump in the first go around, but once they were there, people saw what they did. I don't know. It's weird. Governor Dunleavy is required to fill her seat before the 14th of December, and GOP party chairwoman Carmela Warfield is requesting qualified residents of districts 25 and 26 to apply before 5 p.m. on November the 20th. That's this Thursday. So this Thursday, they have to apply. The interview and selection process by the Legislative Districts Committee will take place at the Band of Brothers Alaska in Wasilla on Sunday the 23rd at 4 p.m. Once completed, the Alaskan Republican Party will send a list of their top 3 applicants to Governor Dunleavy. According to the law, when a vacancy occurs in the legislature, the governor has 30 days to appoint a qualified person to fill the seat. They must be a member of the same political party as the predecessor, and in this case, that would be a registered Republican or an independent or non-party candidate who still supports the GOP's political goals. Once appointed, the person must be confirmed by a majority of Republicans in the legislature. That's the sticking point, isn't it? That's the sticking point every time, is that we've got a majority of Republicans in the legislature, yet we've got bipartisan coalitions in both chambers. That's just crazy. All applicants need to submit a completed Alaska Republican Party application, a financial disclosure, a cover letter, and a resume. And they can all be emailed to admin@alaskagop.net no later than 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 20th. So, there you go. There you go, my friends. That's what it looks like right there. Let's get to it. If you live in District 25 or 26 and you're not happy with the way things are going, or you want to get it done, now I know Kathy Tilton is gonna apply for that. Delana Johnson said she has no interest in it. She's the other representative from the other district, but I know Kathy Tilton is interested. So. But maybe if you feel you'd be better, I guess you could feel free to jump in there and do it. We are making a difference in some ways. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about it. This last election, my first election down here in the Kenai Peninsula Borough, I felt pretty good because we were able to get the proposition passed that moved the local elections to November to consolidate all the election dates, so they all occur on one day to align with both the borough with the national and state election dates. And it was an overwhelming vote. It's something like 70% of the people voted in favor of that. So it's pretty popular. I think you could see that it's a pretty popular vote. That's why places like Fairbanks don't want to put that on the ballot. They don't want that out there. They like it. They being the more progressive side of the equation. They like it because the smaller voter turnout means that special interests can dominate those elections. And when you separate the elections out into multiple days, it dilutes the impetus for the voting pool to get out there and get it done. So that's why there's been such a fight against doing that. And that's why Anchorage, quite honestly, you could see that most of the Liberal Assembly members have had something to say about that over the last couple of years, as that effort has been pushed in Anchorage as well, because their municipal elections take place in April of all times. So moving elections to November has been favored by many folks across Alaska, especially conservatives, who believe that a larger voter turnout will translate into more conservative candidates getting elected. Now, whether that happens or not, it at least would make it more convenient for all Alaskans so they don't have to vote twice, 3 times. You got the primary, then you got the municipal in October, then you got the general, and then let's get it done one time, right? You get the primary in August for one primary, and then you get the general election in November, and we're done. That would seem to make more sense to me in the long run. But Soldotna is going to do it. It's now moved it. The city council, the Soldotna city council members and other Kenai Peninsula residents are now moving. Soldotna has now moved their local elections to align with the borough, now that the borough has signed off on it. So more communities in the area all aligning their elections to be in November. I think it's a smart move. I think it's a very smart move. And I hope we could see more of that coming from, we could see more of that in places like Fairbanks and Anchorage, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and other good news, the ranked choice voting, the city of Juneau was going to vote on putting ranked choice voting in for their city, and they have now voted to postpone it indefinitely. Initially, the assembly was set to vote on the issue in August, but delayed the vote until after the fall elections. But during the meeting, Juneau residents made their voices heard about the potential changes. They said that the change worked for Alaska, but wouldn't work for Juneau. Other residents said that the assembly should put election changes before the voters. So we'll see. So as of right now, it's postponed indefinitely in Juneau. And I think that's a good piece of news there. Although I wonder, are they against it may work for Alaska, but it won't work for Juneau? Is that because Juneau is a progressive town overall and they're afraid of letting the minority slip in on the Republican side? When you've got multiple Dems running and you've got one Republican, are you afraid of that? Is that what's going on? Anyway, it's an interesting discussion. All right. Well, enough about politics. Let's get some of our positivity on, shall we? Chris Story is going to be joining us here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with Chris Story, the man from Homer. We'll be back right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. We are in the break. We are in the break. We are talking now. We are talking. Chris Story, the man from Homer, is about to jump in and join us, partake of the willing madness here. That is the Michael Duke Show. Let's see if Chris is See if Chris is here, ready to go. Are you ready? Ready, my friend? Are you ready?
Good morning, as always.
As always, ready and steady. All right, you're good. What's your topic for today?
One big, beautiful mistake.
One big, beautiful. Why did you have to make it about me? That's all I want to know. Why did you have to make it about me? How you been, my friend? How's Chris' story? Are you into the holiday spirit yet?
Oh, absolutely. I was back in July. My holiday spirit starts on July 4th, as you well know. Hey, did you hear about the parable about the man with a long beard?
I did not.
One day he had a really long beard, and one day somebody asked him, "Hey, do you sleep with the beard under the covers or on top of the covers?" And he said, "I don't know." And that night he went to sleep and put his beard under the covers and couldn't sleep, and then tried it on top of the covers and couldn't sleep. He never slept again.
Okay. That was the parable. Do I sleep with him under the covers or over the covers? And he never slept again. Why didn't he just shave the beard off? I mean, I'm just asking for a friend. I mean, what would
See,
would
that's
he
third alternative thinking. I like the way you think. I like the way
right?
your brain works. A lot of your listeners think that you're, you know, I'm just going to put it frankly, not very smart. But I think really what it is that you have this third alternative approach. And I just thought about that. I just read about that parable the other day, and I thought about you and whether you slept under or outside the covers. And then, but it's the idea that once you start overthinking the process of anything in your life, it'll drive you mad. So some things just
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like something that I lose sleep over. It's funny
Well,
to
you
watch.
will now.
No, I won't, because I sleep with my beard under the cover with me. So I'm
Oh,
under
so
the
you're aware. Okay, yeah.
I'm aware. So I'm not going to overthink it.
Man.
And even if I didn't know, I really wouldn't care. What would it matter? That's something that I picked up probably 12, 15 years ago. I just got to a point to where, I mean, Chris, I was obsessed with what was going on in the news. I was obsessed with national politics. I was obsessed with everything that was happening in Juneau. I mean, I was just like, and I was angry all the time. My wife said at one point, she's like, you're the kids are afraid because you're angry all the time. I'm like, I'm not angry at them. She goes, I know, but you're just angry. And I mean, that was kind of a light bulb moment for me when I realized these are things that I can't control. Why am I thinking and focusing and pontificating and circle thinking about all these things, which I have no control over? And that was an aha moment for me. And ever since then, I've been able to basically say, if I can't control it, I'm not going to worry about it. And that has been a blessing for me. So if you ask me above the covers or under the covers, I'd be like, yep, there you go.
Does this coincide with the adaptation of Frozen by Walt Disney and Let It
Yes,
Go?
it was Let It Go. It was that I
Okay.
watched
See, I
that.
knew you were influenced by cartoons. I just didn't know to what extent.
I've actually never seen that movie, but it's funny because my daughter mentioned that at one point. She goes, just because I said something about that, she goes, "Oh, you mean like Let It Go?" And I'm like, "What do you mean Let It Go?" She starts singing the song. I'm like, "What are you doing?" She goes, "The song, the music, the Frozen." I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about."
And
But anyway, it's there's just, again, things it's the whole serenity prayer, right? The old Irish serenity prayer, that kind of thing. By the way, besides, I couldn't shave my beard because it is my strength, right? I'm like Samson. If you cut my hair, I just fall apart. That's
mentally,
yeah.
you would just become a wandering generality full
And
of gibberish.
I'd lose all authority because, I mean, if I shave my beard off, I look like a 12-year-old boy. So, I mean,
I believe it.
I'd lose all my authority at that point. I can no longer be the wizened sage. And I couldn't play Santa Claus for Christmas. That would be another bummer that I couldn't do anymore. So it's all good. All right. Well, I'm wanting to do Christmas. I'm trying to figure out, maybe we should do, I'm trying to decide next week if I want to do just some fun stuff, because it's coming up to the holidays and we're going to be off on Thursday and Friday. But I think in Christmas time, Chris, we got to do some Christmassy stuff on the show with you in December. Let's think about that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it and think about it for a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
Tastes like chicken. All right, here we go. Chris Story is our guest. We're gonna be, we're gonna jump ahead. Be concerned, but try to avoid the term worry. I'm not concerned. I mean, I'm concerned in the fact that at least I know about it, but I don't think about it. After that, I just don't. Because again, if I can't control it, why am I wasting precious brain space on it? My subconscious has got better things to work on, like success, right? All right. Here we go, my friends. Chris Story, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, my friends, welcome back. One final segment for the show here today. Joining us is one of my favorite people in the world, even though he does beat me down verbally all the time. Just told me I wasn't very smart. Oh, he said, no, wait. Let me put that back. He said that my listeners think that I'm not very smart.
Mm-hmm. Big distinction. Thank you.
A big distinction there. Yeah. He loves me, but I mean, the listeners, man,
nobody else does.
I know, exactly. Chris Story, the man from Homer. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Author of a plethora of books, including The Backyard Millionaire, The Millionaire Maker, also the Jacob Mann series, and also a realtor and a potter and a speaker, radio show host, all-around good guy. Chris Story joins us this morning for our weekly life coaching lesson. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning. And on my mind is one big, beautiful mistake.
One big, beautiful mistake. Okay. I mean, I feel that. What do you mean by that? What is our lesson today about the one big, beautiful mistake?
Well, you mentioned pottery a moment ago, and in fact, that ties into this beautifully and seamlessly. Paul Soldner wrote a book after he read a book, which is often what happens because readers become writers, and writers are definitely readers. But he read a book by Bernard Leach, a great world famous potter, and he wrote a book called The Potter's Book, and in it he described a process, an ancient Japanese form of firing pottery called raku, named after an ancient family who had been servants basically to the royalty of Japan. Long story short, Paul Soldner reads this book in 1960 and misinterpreted how raku pottery was made. He misunderstood the concept of what to do after the pot was removed from the kiln, because you remove with a pair of metal tongs, you remove the glowing hot 2000 degree pot, you remove it, and they rapid cooled it in Japan. He thought that he was to smother it, and so he smothered it over some dried leaves, which instantly combusted and created an incredible whole new effect, which you and I as Americans call raku. But in fact, in Japan, it looks nothing like what we think of as raku pottery. Is completely different. So in making that one big, beautiful mistake, Paul Soldner created an entire new art form based on a misunderstanding.
And we've seen that before, right? I mean, penicillin kind of came out of a mistake, right? I mean, all these other things that could happen where it's this, or what some people would call fortuitous circumstance, right? Where something kind of unexpected happens. You weren't expecting it. It was a mistake. Somebody dropped, you dropped your peanut butter in my chocolate. No, you dropped your chocolate in my peanut butter. Boom. Next thing you know, Reese's peanut butter cups are reformed. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that happens sometimes. How do we just look out for it? Do we make it happen? What do you think?
You make mistakes every day. That's what we love about you. Just kidding. Why am I picking on you today? I don't know.
I think my first mistake was having Chris. Let me push this button here and get Chris out of here.
Exactly. Mute.
Yeah. No, I mean, I make mistakes all the time, and sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good. I mean, but I haven't had that kind of fortuitous circumstance mistake, but it does happen to people.
What I love about that, there's a through line between the two forms of pottery, the ancient Japanese pottery and the more American modern interpretation thereof. There is one through line that is common, and that is perfectly imperfect. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, the idea that it is in the imperfections, it is in the small mistakes that make the beauty, that create the actual beautiful product that people know and love and so forth. So in other words, I guess it's like this show, for example, it's live radio, so anything goes. And if you were to sit here and record it and script it and everything, then it would be a different story. You don't ever watch a movie for the outtakes. You enjoy watching the outtakes and the behind the scenes, but you don't want to see the mistakes in the movie because it's designed to be perfect or more perfect. But there are mistakes that happen even in the filming and the production, and ad-lib lines that appear out of nowhere and end up in the final cut. It is in this imperfect world that we find perfection. America was never intended to be perfect, just more perfect. We were born in the fire of war, and we were always intended to aim towards a more perfect union. No, they didn't say perfect, more perfect. And I think that's on purpose, understanding there is no such thing as one perfection. It's just aiming towards perfection is an imperfect process, but it is made for an incredible experiment, the greatest country in the world as a result of it. And I think that's kind of the through line of it all, though, is that this perfectly imperfect, that is a life. That is your life. That is mine. That is even, believe it or not, the mini king, Jeff Bezos, his life is perfectly imperfect. What is he worth? $400 billion or whatever. He's got a thick neck.
Right.
Suddenly, The Rock, that it was a huge mammoth of a man, is now gauntly thin. And Jeff Bezos, who was a thin little nerd, is now like beefcake. I don't know what's happening in the world, but it's perfectly imperfect. Even those who we admire are living a perfectly imperfect life.
Well, I think that's a great point, when you talk about the more perfect, a more perfect union, because I mean, that's 100%, because that always means that we're constantly, we don't have a destination, right? Because we're constantly striving. And that's what I think that, when you're working towards something like that, and a happy little accident, goes on or whatever, I think that's where, you see the beauty in that.
They're like crossing between two buildings on a wire. You're always out of balance. The person who is doing the tightrope walking is never perfectly in balance. If they were, the moment you achieve perfect balance, you're going to fall. You have to stay in balance at all times. That is where the beauty of being able to tightrope walk until eventually you do die, which is what happened to that whole family, right? What is the name of that family? It's always escaping me. One of your commenters will bring it up. But anyway, the Windlers, anyway, it's irrelevant to the point I'm trying to make, which is perfectly imperfect. Japanese tea masters prefer an imperfect bowl. In other words, if you find a perfect specimen of a tea bowl, it will not make its way into the tea ceremony because it's the imperfection that they find in the beautiful. Tiffany and I, on our honeymoon, were visiting. Back in the old days, Michael, there used to be things called phone books. And so we were at a hotel in Waikiki, and I pulled open the phone book and looked in the yellow pages and found this pottery master on the far side of the island. And we took a bus and a plane and a train, and it took us forever to get there, but we did. We got over to the studio, and I'm looking at these tea bowls that are in this wooden case that are like, each one is tucked its own little square and a little shadow box. And I pull each one out, and I'm, as all potters do, you turn it over, you're looking at the mark and the foot and the thinness, you're feeling every aspect of this pot. And I'm doing this for like 6, 7, 8 bowls in a row. And suddenly Tiffany notices the prices, and she comes over and nudges me and is like, put that down. Each bowl was marked between $400, $500, $800. And these are just small little tea bowls that when you kind of put your hands together, like fit in. We're talking 3-4 inches across, maybe 4.5 at most. And I carefully put it back in. And the potter was watching me from across the room, and he comes over and he goes, don't worry about it. He goes, these don't worry. It's fine. You can touch these and handle these all you want. If I do not price them this way, when the tea master comes in with his students, and if it's a busload of students, and each tea master from Japan will come over, if they're not priced high enough, they're perceived as not having enough value. And so I have to price them here. Otherwise, they won't buy them. I'm like, wow, okay. So he actually sold me a smaller pot, a little teacup, for very little money, like $30 or something, which back in 1990 was actually a lot of money, but still it wasn't the hundreds of dollars.
Right.
But it's about perception, and the perception from the Tea Master's point of view is, if you don't put a high value on this, we won't value it. But by the way, none of them were perfect, and if they were perfect, they wouldn't have been picked up to begin with.
Yeah. Well, and that's good. And I sometimes I would think that we will make a mistake or something will go wrong, but we won't know the perfect turning point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we were talking during the break about how I had an epiphany, how I had a light bulb moment about 15 years ago, where I just decided that I was very angry. My wife came to me and said, "You're scaring the kids. You're angry." And I'm like, "I'm not angry at them." She goes, "I know, but you're angry." Anyway, it was a mistake to do what I had been doing, and I didn't realize how big of a difference it would make in my life until much later. It was a couple of years later that I finally realized how much more relaxed and how much better I felt. So, a happy mistake, can turn dividends in many ways, and sometimes not immediately apparent.
And I think America herself, being this perfect experiment, this perfect experiment at imperfection, and understanding that there is, look, if we get towards an ideal society, what we're actually talking about is socialism, which is always attempted through the means of communism, which requires force and inevitably leads to dictatorship. There is no ideal perfection where everything will be in perfect balance. We are meant to be a bit out of balance at all times. There is supposed to be a push and a pull. There's supposed to be a swing of the pendulum. We just want for a more perfect union, respecting individuality, respecting your God-given rights, all of those things that are enshrined in our founding documents, while not perfectly interpreted every day by everybody. They're at least a document we could come back to source, go back to formula, and say, okay, all right, we got it wrong for the last 4 years. Let's go back to formula. Let's start again. Let's see if we can get this more perfect, but never mistake perfect with the idea, which is actually imperfect. Perfectly imperfect is in balance.
Right. And you're always striving for perfection, or always striving, but again, find the joy in the imperfections of what you have. We got about 90 seconds here, Chris. So final thoughts on the one big, beautiful mistake. How do we look for it? How do we benefit from it? Give it to me.
That's interesting. You should bring up my first book, Born to Live. I'm just kidding. You didn't. I did. But in it is a simple message, and it goes like this: you learn from the past. Okay, we don't want to repeat our mistakes. Learn from your past, the good and the bad. Look forward, meaning set goals. Look to the future. The future truly is bright. America's future has never been brighter than it is right now. Look forward, but also remember that the good life, the life of purpose and on purpose, is right here in the present, this moment that we just experienced together right now.
All right. I like it. Chris Story, the man from Homer. He comes on board every week to give us some positivity, and this week is no different. Chris, thank you so much for coming on board, my friend. As always, you're a blessing to us, and I appreciate you, even though you do despitefully put me down and so, I forgive you, Chris. I forgive you. It's all, so good.
Thank you, Michael. You're the best.
All right. Good to talk to you, my friend. All right, folks, we're out of time for today. Tomorrow, Kevin McCabe, Melissa Burnett, The Michael Duke Show. Okay. I don't know if Chris had anything left to say there, but I thought I'd give him the floor since he's still connected. Anything else, my friend?
Oh, thank you. I was going to tell you, there's a guy in Soldotna, a friend of mine, who is really starting to, he's got the bit in his mouth, and he's really starting to run with this property tax deal. He's created a nonprofit organization just in the last 2 weeks. I mean, this guy isn't wasting time or energy, and he's really getting some momentum. So I'm going to be talking with him hopefully in the next day or two, and I'll keep you on the loop on that organization and how we can help advance this conversation statewide around property tax relief, if not wholesale change and fundamentally changing the nature of property taxes here, at least relief and making it more fair.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to hear about that. Yeah, no, feel free.
Yep.
Feel free to hit me with it, and we'll keep it going on. I'd love that, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, you got it, buddy. Talk to you later. Bye.
Keep me in the loop. Thank you so much. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. That does it for us, folks. We're out of time for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. Here you go, guys. I'll give this to you. This is my Christmas gift to you so far. Here we go.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.